It's been a while since I've spoken about Notion on this channel, but with the recent update with groups added to the databases, I thought, you know what, let's have a look at what's been going on in 2021 with all of Notion's new features and how they compare with the tools that I'm currently using, maybe looking at what Notion are going to do in 2022. As you can see, my Notion is pretty bare. I don't use it for personal use, but I do still use it for team use and for helping other individuals using Notion in teams and businesses, etc. So I am still involved in the app, I am still using the app, just not for my own personal use. Now, when we go down to the bottom right hand corner, you can see we've got the question mark. When we click on that, you can see the What's New tab. When you click on that, it will open up another page which will share everything that's happened with Notion. Now, for some reason, at the time of making this video, the groups update, the group feature that they added, isn't currently in this What's New page, which is why I follow Notion on Twitter and all the other creators around Notion on Twitter, so you sort of get an idea of what's going on. So this is the What's New page, and I'm going to go through some of the features, starting off with the group feature, because the group feature is the newest and most exciting. So I've just made a database, it's brand new, it's only got the name property and the tags property because that's the default when you make a table database. Go to the three-dot menu, click on group. Now you can select any of the properties that's in the database, and that's what you're going to group by. So we've got the name, we've got tags, or we've got none. Now at the moment, there's no groups there. I'm going to click on tags, and this is now going to group it, very similar to the board view, but group it in this view. Now if I add idea as a tag inside of the database, you can see it's now separated that into a section. If I add another one, so I come into here and go thought, push enter, now I have idea and thought in the drop-down menu, but because I'm grouping by this filter, you can see it's loading, and there we go. So now we've got three different groups. We've got thought, idea, and then no tags. When we go back into the three-dot menu, we can go back into the groups. We can now hide all empty groups, so the group that is empty. So if I then come into here and delete that, it's now hidden that group because it's empty. There is nothing in the no tag group. I go back into the group options, I can then show that again. So now it's showing up the no tag group. I can hide all, show all, rearrange, and hide specifics. Then when I create a board view, it's going to use that multi-select property that we have and actually use those as the board view as you would normally see. So we've got idea, thought, and no tags. There are actually colors in here, which is a very nice addition, something else they've added in there. Now when we go to the three-dot menu, we've got subgroup. And what subgroup does is basically do groups like you just saw in the table view, but with the groups that are already there because it's a board view. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go into one of the pages, add a property, and I'm going to add a select property called area. I'm now going to go into this page. I'm going to give this page an area called home. Now when I go to the three-dot menu, add a subgroup, I can go none. I can select area. Now what it's going to do is you've still got the grouping of the multi-select property, so idea and thought at the top, but now we have the other groupings below that with home. So we've got the home area grouping, and then we have the main grouping at the top. These groupings still using all the normal features with the board view, and just as something to note, when there are groups, so this is the same as the list view, the timeline, all of the other views, you can toggle this shut or toggle it open. It's entirely up to you. Another additional feature that is actually really nice, when we go into the three-dot menu and go into group, you actually see I'm grouping by property. That's actually a relation property I just made, didn't call it anything, it's just called property. But the relation property is now being grouped, which is completely new. But when you come into here and you click on John, so this is actually a page in the new database that I made called new, but when you click on this, it takes you to that page. So it jumps you to the page through the relation. Let me just do that again. So Danny, that's me. I'm in this unnamed database. I'm clicking on the relation, which is the group filter. I'm clicking on Danny and it's taking me to that page. So it's giving you a hyperlink, a jump link for anything that you're related to or grouping by, which is a very small feature, but a very nice feature that they've added in here. Now heading all the way back to the 10th of March, because that is roughly around the time I've stopped making Notion videos on this channel, we're going to go through a couple of the updates and see what they've been doing over 2021. Now I haven't spoken much about Notion because I prefer to preach what I practice rather than practice what I preach. So if I'm using the tool, I'll talk about it. If I'm not using the tool, I won't talk about it. That's my personal view on what I'm going to talk about on the channel, because I don't want to be talking about something that I'm not using, that I'm not actively engaged in, because I may miss things out or I may just be giving advice that isn't ideal. But having said that, looking at all the updates and comparing the updates to the tools I'm using is still very nice, very useful to see if I'm actually going to move back to the tool later on. Now the first thing that comes up is shared pages. Now shared pages is one of those features that is really useful for team and collaboration work, because when you're sharing pages with other people, that list may get large, as you can see in the animation, but for my own personal use, this didn't really happen because I didn't share that many pages with other people. So for personal use, not an update that I would use, but when you're working in teams, very useful. Then the 23rd of March, they added in the Android widgets. Now, the Android widgets were amazing, and they still are amazing. It's a great addition. But for me, my personal use, tasks, I have Todoist. And Todoist is a widget on my phone, and I don't have to go and click into the app to get to the tasks. They are already there. And then with my calendar, I use Google Calendar. And my Google Calendar, again, is just on my phone. I don't need to click into a page to find it. So tasks and projects, or tasks and events and projects, are all on my page, all on my phone, without having to go into an app. And loading an app sometimes can take a bit of time. Plus, if it's offline, it can be a little bit irritating, but with notes it's a little bit different. So the app widget is really nice going into certain pages, but for tasks I have Todoist, for events I have my calendar, and then for notes I use Obsidian, which I'll go through a little bit later on. There was an upgrade for the paying, which is great to see. Then in April, they added this reports page, which I've literally just found out reading through because I didn't see it in any of the updates. Maybe this is me just not paying too much attention, but it means that any public page you have can now actually be reported by anyone viewing the page. Just as a note, when you are sharing things on Notion, make sure it is appropriate, which hopefully we're all being appropriate anyway, but that report page feature is a very nice one for security reasons, I think. Well, security and just ethical reasons. More powerful math equations is another nice addition, but for people using math equations, I would imagine, my personal use anyway, writing them out is much quicker than typing them out in whatever it is. But when you're doing a presentation, it makes sense to write them out. So there could be uses there. I personally don't know many people that actually use math in Notion, but still a nice update. Clipping web pages from Safari sounds like another really useful update, but as I don't use Safari, I can't speak on that too much. Automate.io integrations, Typeform integrations, Zapier integrations, all of the API related stuff is amazing and really useful for people that use API and integrations. I personally don't use any API or integrations, and I wouldn't need to either because I have my tasks in Todoist, and they are integrated with Google Calendar. It's a two-way sync, so anything that goes onto Google Calendar goes into Todoist, and vice versa. And because they are both synced, my Morgan, which is my calendar app on my desktop, is synced with Google Calendar, so I don't need any API integrations in that sense because they all work with one another. Morgan goes to Google Calendar, Todoist goes to Google Calendar, so the only integration I would use with Notion is Notion and Google Calendar, not any of the other forms. But for people using API integrations for loads of other database management, then it makes sense and it's really useful. But again, I can't speak too much on it because for personal use, I didn't use it. Then in June, we had the synced block feature, which was brought in and is very similar to block references used in Roam, Obsidian, and loads of other tools and apps now. But the sync block feature was basically the transclusion, the tab bar that I made a while back, where you could manipulate it a little bit, but it was a formal, this is actually a block that you can use rather than doing a little bit of like hacky codey copy paste stuff, which is really nice to see. But again, with my personal use of sync block, I used it for one thing and one thing only, and that was my tab bar, going between different pages. I never used it for note-taking or any management. The sync block was more about a global update so everyone could see the same thing or see the same thing in multiple pages when you change it, and most of my use cases were actually helping other people with teams and management. So if there was an update page, that's what you'd use a sync block for. You could use a sync block in a template as well, but then you're syncing a block and then unsyncing the block when you want to use it, which is the same as just using a template or using, text expander. In July, they added more integrations to the API, but they also brought some changes to the quote block, and you'll also see a callout block being changed later on, and the list view. Now, my personal views on this, another great use of changing aesthetics, but for me, in my notes, in my tasks, in my projects, I'm not that fussed about aesthetics. So for me, it wasn't a big change, and I'm not really going to make much of a difference, but I know people that do like aesthetics, do like the change. What I would say to that is sometimes you can get too caught up on aesthetics and forget the actual purpose of what you're doing. I'm saying you as in me, my past experiences, because there are so many options to customize things with colors and different types of quote blocks and images and emojis and the rest of it. It can be a small distraction. But as long as you can manage that, it's fine. It's one of those things in Notion where, oh, there's an update, let's change everything about my space, but I don't really need to. Anyway, Now, using Notion as a public website, I don't think makes total sense. Using it as an aside, yes. Using it to start with, yes, agree. Using it to share pages, yes, agree. But as your personal website, I would probably host it on a hosting platform somewhere else, like Bluehost using WordPress or using Webflow or something like that, and then diverting people to the Notion page rather than using Notion as the website to start with. My personal preference, but you can do it either way. And they made some changes to that, which does make things slightly easier. But again, you could use things like Fruition or super.so. Again, there are restrictions using just Notion for that. What if Notion goes down? There goes your whole website. Not great, but those issues could happen anyway. So again, it's a balance to and fro, but a very nice update. Now, the formatting toolbar on iOS and Android was an interesting one for me because Obsidian, the tool that I use, is on mobile, and at the time this update came out, they didn't have the mobile app, so I thought, oh, this is really cool, but now Obsidian have the mobile app. I'll probably share something on screen to the side. The mobile app in Obsidian allows you to do all of the functions, just like Notion does in the window, but you can customize the toolbar, so you can put whatever function, whatever feature, whatever command you need at the top of the toolbar, so you don't have to go find it every time. So in Notion, when you want to add something, and it's something you're consistently doing, maybe you're adding a certain block every time, or maybe you're adding or doing a certain action every time, instead of having to go find it, in Obsidian, you could just put that to the toolbar at the top because you can customize the toolbar. So this is my most frequent, so I'm going to put it there. And again, I'm going to add this small caveat with the difference between Notion and Obsidian for note-taking. In Obsidian, because it's Markdown file and it's just a file, the templates are kind of like text expanders. So in Obsidian, I can have a template, and it's just a text expanded version of whatever it is. So essentially I have text expander on my mobile. So when I'm out, I can just use a template and dump it into a page. Whereas in Notion, I'd have to be in a database to use the template, or I'd have to use the template button. But if I'm in a new page, I wouldn't have the template button there. So I'd have to either do a copy and paste, or I'd need to be in a page specific, or use a template to have the template button to get the setup there. It just is a little bit more pre-planning, pre-working, and knowing exactly what you want to do and where you want to have things in Notion, whereas Obsidian you can just work straight from wherever you are. Then towards the end of July, they added in more integrations for the API. Again, I've already said I don't use it, but for those people that do use it, nice additions. They also added some name changes, so some people that couldn't write their full name now can. Then we had better callout blocks, so there was an update to the quote block, being able to change the size. Then there's this change with the callout block, so you can add images to the callout block. Now, my personal opinion on the callout block was it was something that I knew was there, but I never used. I never used the callout block because I knew where I was looking, and most of my space was either text blocks in a database page that had properties, which the callout block information was just in the properties, or the pages was full of linked databases. So I never really used callout blocks in my personal space, but in team spaces, callout blocks were really, really useful for calling out information. So again, Notion being used for a team setting, a business setting, a group setting, rather than individuals. And because I'm by myself, I'm lonely by myself, I don't see a use in this. But again, it's another nice feature for those that are using that block. The improved calendar view on the iPad and tablet was very, very needed. I personally don't use a tablet, and I not really used a tablet. My sister, on the other hand, does and did use a tablet when she was using Notion, and so this update was very, very needed, really useful for those tablet users, and that's all I can really say with that. It's just, yes, gonna be honest here, we've got August 10 SOC2 Type 2 certificate. I have no idea what that means. I just don't know what it means. I know it's privacy, I know it's security, don't know what it means. When I was using Notion, I was never really that fussed because I didn't have anything on there that I was worried about losing. But again, personal use, not business use. So big company using Notion, I wasn't that fussed. It wasn't an issue. Now all of my stuff is locally stored because that's the way Obsidian works. I never have to worry about it. I have local backups because of the way Obsidian Sync works on my laptop, on my PC, on my phone. So I have no worry of anyone getting it because it's all locally stored and it's backed up everywhere. So it doesn't really matter if something breaks. So a great update, I think, for people that are worried about security, but again, don't know too much about it. Then the update to callout blocks, so adding images to callout blocks, was added to quote blocks. And again, quote blocks are very similar for me in use. Quote blocks are useful for doing a page, a summary page of something. This person said something and then you're going to explain going forwards, which is very much a public page, like an article page. But in my own personal notes, I never used quote blocks because I knew who was saying it. I quoted it, and in Obsidian, I just put a footnote on something because normally when you're quoting someone, it's lots of people have said lots of different things. So I reference loads of different people. So it's not actually a quote anymore. It's a condensed piece of information that's been referenced multiple times, so quotes just aren't appropriate. That's my personal use, but still a very nice addition. Also in September, we had recently visited pages sync across devices. Now, this is one of those times where I think syncing across devices is very individual, because a lot of people, when they're using Notion, they're either on their tablet or on their phone or on their PC, and when you're going between backwards and forwards, having those shortcuts is nice, but for me, whenever I was in something, the shortcut was just to my dashboard. I just had one page that I was going to. Maybe there was two, but they would be linked as actual pages. So the recently page, I never used it. So syncing, nice for those people that use the search or the recently visited pages tab, but I never used it. I just went straight to my dashboard and that was it. And with the widget, with the mobile widget, you can go straight to the page that you want to anyway, unless you're going through notes and rummaging around. I don't know. I guess that would depend how you're using Notion. So a nice feature for those that use it, but I always had just a link to dashboard. Better URL properties is an interesting update. So when you click on the property, it now just takes you to that place, which you could kind of do anyway with the bit to the right of the box, or you'd have to click in and then go through the link. So with links in Notion, most of the URL links that I was grabbing and putting into Notion were from notes. Either they were websites, there were blogs, there were videos, things like that, and then you'd click on them and they'd go out. And when I was using Notion, I'd embed the video, but most of the time I'd just go to YouTube anyway, so I'd use the link. Now I'm in Obsidian, the link functions exactly the same way. You just hover over it and you click on it. Yes, admittedly, if you're in the edit mode, you need to control click, but you're control clicking anyway. What you get editor is coming soon as well. But something else you can do in Obsidian, which to my knowledge you can't do in Notion, is you can actually change the viewing experience of a URL. So if you have a long URL and you just want it to be my blog or something like that, I'll probably share an example to the side of me. You can do that in Obsidian, but you can't do it in Notion. So again, pros and cons of having the database feature, just clicking and going, but in Obsidian you can change what it looks like. And when the what you get editor is out, which is coming soon in Obsidian, I think that's just going to completely surpass Notion, in my personal opinion. But again, I am biased. I'm just going to say it again, I am biased. The copy to clipboard button is one of those buttons that is just convenience, and it's just a really nice addition, a very nice addition. You can't do it for all of the properties inside of a database, but just a very nice feature. Now, again, I'm going to reference Obsidian because that's the tool that I use, but there aren't any properties as such inside Obsidian because it's just a blank markdown page, so you never needed a button for properties, because all the properties or aliases and tags and all that metadata, it's just a normal text box, so you click on the box and Control C, it's there. New emojis and page icons, I'm not a big aesthetic person, I don't use them, so yay! Now, the dynamic at today was a really interesting find, so I didn't actually know they had done this inside Notion until just looking at it now. And when I'm in Obsidian, I use my templates. My templates already do this. It's just the way Markdown works for the way Obsidian works as the tool. You put in the template, and the template automatically dumps in the date in whatever format you choose. Again, Markdown, we can choose in Obsidian what format it goes in, whereas in Notion, it's just at today. That's the way it shows you. That's what you get. So if you're in America or in Canada or whatever, you get the certain date format you want, whereas in Obsidian you can change it to whatever you want. Copy and paste multiple columns, I think went under the radar for a lot of people, but when you used to copy and paste columns, you'd copy and paste 3 columns, and when you pasted it, it would just be a big line down. Now, when you copy and paste them, as you can see in the animation, they actually stay, they keep formatted, which is very nice. It's one of those small things that when you're creating pages, it's just, it's so much easier to do. So just a very nice way the tool works using columns now inside of Obsidian. I don't use columns, we don't use columns because we have multiple pages, which is a feature that Notion just doesn't have because it works differently. It uses columns instead of the multiple page style, and that's just personal preference. Updates to iPhones and iPads is great, but I'm not an Apple user, so can't comment. Adding a homepage to your Notion public pages, again, a very nice additional feature for those using Notion as their public website, but my personal preference would be to use a normal website manager, so like Webflow or Ghost or Bluehost or whoever, whatever, and then direct people to the Notion, or use videos or blogs or articles or social media posts to direct people to the appropriate Notion page, rather than it being searched for. But again, this is still a very nice feature and additional one at that. And then also in September, there was the comments panel. And the comments panel was one of those things that you thought, maybe they could add other things to this. And this is where I'm going to speculate moving forwards. I don't know any of this is fact or true. This is me speculating. But because they've added that side panel to comments, they can also add other features in there. So when you're looking at some of the add-ons, if you look back at my add-ons video, there are evergreen notes and other things like backlinks and other stuff. And they could put some of the things that they have currently in the page, like the backlinks as an example, in a side panel rather than at the top. Another example could be the table of contents. They could put the table of contents in that side panel, in the, where the comments show, instead of it being at the top of the page, because when you scroll down the page, the table of contents disappears, so they could put it at the side. A very, very nice addition, not necessarily in the comments, because if you're an individual, you don't use the comments. So individuals using comments or teams using comments, very nice. You can also see resolved comments, which is which is useful as well. But the fact that they've added in that side panel opens up some options and ideas for additional features later on, potentially in 2022. Now moving into October, we've got the hide all or show all option in the properties. So when you're in a database, you can hide all or show all. So instead of, for those people that have loads and loads and loads of properties, there's some people that I can think of that have way too many. Instead of having to go down and click them all or unclick them all, you can just show all or hide all, which is very nice, but it's useful for the setup. But once you've set it up, that's it, it's done. So maybe just making the setup a little bit easier could have been a different way of going about it, but again, it's very nice to get a quick change, quick view, especially when you're making new views. So for those creating databases or creating things in Notion, rather than the people that just come in, do the stuff and leave, which is basically most of the teams that I work with. You've got like 1 or 2 people that are in Notion working, using, and then the rest of the team just come in, write whatever, and then disappear again. So those people making in Notion, very useful tool. Better bullet lists, I'm not sure whether better is the most appropriate word to put there, but it's certainly a different way of doing bullet lists. So with the lists, they had the numbers, so they've got the 1, the letter, the Roman numerals. Now with the bullets, they've got circles, squares, open circles. I mean, there's loads of opportunity for aesthetics. Again, a nice aesthetic change, but for me personally, I'm not that fussed. And then the most recent change, apart from the group feature that I explained at the beginning of the video, Japanese. Notion in Japanese. Now, obviously, I'm not Japanese, so I can't read any of that, but the fact they're using it and it's going international, really good to see, especially because Notion is such a useful tool with people getting started for organization of tasks, projects, notes, and things like that, because Notion is a great starting tool, and this is where I'm going to go a little bit ranty here. Notion is a great starting tool, but because there are so many options, you could either go in one direction and get very, very niche down into Notion, which is very useful, very beneficial, but it can get a little bit too hacky in some ways to do certain things. So you have to work around recurring tasks, work around certain things to get what you want out of Notion. So power users may be using advanced formulas or roll-ups and relations, and something I'm actually going to say is Reg Gregory, a great YouTube channel, or you probably already have seen some of her videos or most of her videos, mentioned quite recently that when you have too many roll-ups in a Notion page, it slows it down. And that is where I think Notion starts to struggle a little bit, probably because of the amount of users they have, because it is such a great tool. But when you have loads of stuff going on, the speed does start to decrease. And when I'm in my notes and I'm working in my notes, so I've got something going on, I want to be able to have the speed of the shortcuts, the speed of the navigating around places, which I have in Obsidian. It's just what I have in Obsidian. So when it comes to Notion and using Notion, certainly a great tool, but the speed and some of the other added features that I get in other tools like Todoist, recurring tasks, Google Calendar, the ability to schedule things and link with like almost everything, Morgan, global hotkey so I can quickly bring it up and close it down when I'm working with other pages, and then Obsidian, just Obsidian for note-taking. Look at any of the videos I've done on Obsidian. That's where I think Notion is a great starting place and a great team management. Nothing, I don't personally think many things beat Notion for team management. ClickUp is close. Or ClickUp is better in some use cases. Notion's better in other use cases. Depends on what type of individuals and teams you work with. But for individual purpose, like the PKM individual use for most average users, like gen population, Notion's a little bit over the top. Just my personal opinion, but it'd be great to hear your thoughts in the comments below. So until the next video, get off YouTube and do something productive with your time instead.